I had these values of ownership and growth and authenticity. But meanwhile, I was so scared of putting myself out there as a coach with this like glittery, girly brand, because that was one of the things of one of the many fears that professional men had brought to light, that, it's not professional to have sparkles and crowns and silliness in a business. And so I said, well, maybe this is just a blog and maybe my coaching is something else on the side. I didn't know what I was doing.
All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Adapt You podcast. Super excited to have on our show today a phenomenal guest, a high energy guest, somebody by the name of Kimberly Spencer. Let's talk about Kimberly for a second. She's an award-winning, high-performance, trauma-informed coach and trainer, an Amazon best-selling and author, a TEDx speaker, and the founder of crownyourself.com. Encourage you to go check it out. Helping visionary leaders transform their self-limiting stories, build their empire, stand out fearlessly, and to make income and the impact in society and their life that they deserve. So from her entrepreneurial beginnings at the age of 5, selling bags of glitter water, that's right, glitter water to her neighbors, to becoming an award-winning screenwriter, certified Pilates instructor, in a pageant she won Miss Congeniality, a 6-time WeGo Health Activist Award nominee, Kimberly is proof that it is better to make your own mold than to conform to someone else's. She is also the former executive of a national e-commerce startup and was the owner of a private Pilates studio and a fitness center it was called Fitness with Kim in Los Angeles, California. Her work has been featured on Netflix, the CW, ESPN, Chicken Soup for the Soul, NPR, Thrive Global, CNBC, and Forbes. So bottom line, her resume speaks for herself and her energy is infectious, as you'll see as we jump onto the show. And we're going to start talking a little bit about the thing that I emphasized here in the intro, which is, what is glitter water? So that said, let's get on. Let's meet Kimberly. All right, everybody, welcome Kimberly Spencer to the show. Kimberly, coming in from Australia. How are you? How are you?
I'm doing amazing. I'm doing amazing, mate. My Australian accent is still not quite there yet.
Give it some time. Kimberly is actually not from Australia, but she told me before the show that she went there for a 3-week trip and turned into a 3-year adventure now that you're looking at there in Australia, which I hear is a beautiful place. So thank you so much for being on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. Pumped to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Derek. I'm really excited to be here.
So as a marketer, it was very interesting I was kind of reading through your bio and we're talking about different things. And I'm always interested to hear how people get into becoming an entrepreneur. And you really started, as we said in the intro, as an entrepreneur at the ripe age of 5, trying to run a split test. For those who don't know what that is, you're sort of trying to verify you got 2 different products or 2 different price points. You're trying to see which one will sell better. You were selling something that was called, I believe you called it glitter water at 2 different price points, which were pretty broad. I'm gonna let you sort of explain that to the audience and really how that was your stardom as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So I started out selling bags of glitter water. So basically, it's exactly what you think it is. It's a plastic bag with water in it and then some glitter in it. And I grew up in Los Angeles, so it was very hot in the summers, like a nice dry heat. And I thought what would be great would be refreshing. You could dump a bag of glitter water and then you walk around the day sparkly. And so I split tested the price points for 5 cents or $50. I didn't get any $50 takers, but I did sell some for 5. And for me, glitter water and entrepreneurship, it came naturally because that was the household that I was being raised in. Like, both my parents were entrepreneurs. My mom quit her graphic design job when I was born to support my dad in the admin work because my dad was really good with customer relations and people. He was not good with paperwork. And so my mom came in to help him with supporting in the management side of their business. And when I was 2, like, she was pushing me in the stroller, passing out flyers, doing, old school marketing tactics to try to generate some business for them. And so I literally got to experience the evolution of a business growing up. And when people would see my life in high school or later on in years, people would assume that that had always been, that I had always grown up in a big house and in more affluent with more affluent parents, and I was like, no. When I was a baby, like we was struggling, like Kmart was a specialty. Like,
Yeah.
so I grew up with that, with being able to see the journey. And because my dad was an alcoholic throughout the entirety of his business career up until the last 4 years, um it really showed me that if they could build a multi-million dollar tree business in 30 years, what could I do in 5? So it really inspired me with, with battling those codependencies of not only codependency, but alcoholism and addiction. Like, if he could do that, like, what could
Mhm.
I do in 5 without having those demons that I was, having to drag uphill with me?
Yeah, that's incredible. I know you we when we spoke earlier and we talked and I looked at your bio, you said that your father dealt with addiction, correct? And then also, but was wildly successful, right? You were able to see that uprising. You were inside of that environment. It inspired you to sell your glitter water. I'm gonna make sure I get that right. And at least I'm glad to hear when you started to explain it. I'm glad to hear that you weren't encouraging people to drink the glitter water because I was like,
No, 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 no.
yeah,
That
because
that
you was
would
like,
be
it's hot,
toxic. Like,
yeah, probably not a good
that was in the
idea.
early 90s before edible glitter was a thing. So yeah, that would have been a lawsuit waiting to happen for a 5-year-old.
Probably. So, so, so as you tell me a little bit more about sort of that upbringing and that environment and sort of the journey that you took with life, with being a life coach today, how some of those experiences sort of led you to what you're doing today. We started at glitter water. Where did it go from there?
Well, from there it went into, I was always creative. I was always very entrepreneurial. And I was always the self-starter in school where everyone wanted to pair with me for a group project because I would be the one who would get it done and get an A. And they would all like, and I was also a control freak, so I wasn't really very good with delegating. And so I
So they knew they
learned,
didn't have to work, right?
yeah, they knew they didn't have to
Yeah.
work because I would just take over their work. I had very poor boundaries on that. And I think that for me, the upbringing, especially being with an addict, it definitely led to a higher level of performance because I thought, well, maybe if I'm smart enough, or maybe if I'm skinny enough, or maybe if I'm perfect enough, or maybe if I get good enough grades, then my dad will stop drinking. And so while it made me a high performer, it also spiraled me into a 10-year battle with bulimia. And it wasn't until I was about 16 years old that my mom sat on me, like literally physically tackled me from going to the bathroom and puking up my food. And she said, I'm not going to let you kill yourself, Kim. I love you too much. And it was then that I realized that I was on a slow path to suicide, because that's what an eating disorder is. And I didn't want to die. And so I started looking for other ways. And one of the ways that I found was not following the traditional path. I thought that I had to, because we all live in what I call some form of plagiarized programming, right? Like, we
Mhm.
have these beliefs of the shoulds that this is how my life should be. This is what I should be accomplishing. This is what my parents told me I should be doing. And I had those beliefs very strongly throughout my childhood. And it wasn't until I was in high school and I was doing all the APs and I was doing all the honors classes and I was so devastatingly depressed that my mom literally said, she said, Kim, you're a high achiever. This is not what you want. I know this is not what you want. If you want to drop out, it's okay. She said, you're going to be successful in whatever it is you do. I don't know if this school environment is the one that you're going to have success in.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Sweet mom.
Fortunately,
Yeah.
sweet mom, like,
Thanks.
I didn't end up dropping out, but it did give me the permission to not have to achieve in all of these subjects I had no interest in just because I thought I had to achieve at them.
Mhm.
And that, for me, why is such a high driver. And I found that a lot of the visionary leaders that I work with now, they're why learners. So they may have done well in school, but unless they were given a reason why they needed to learn what they needed to learn and like what actual purpose it served for their life and for their future, that if they weren't given that structure, they struggled. And so for me, I'm very much a why person. And so had you told me when I was 16 years old going through my kinesiology class that if you engage your external rotators and you squeeze your shoulder blades back a little bit and you open up your chest and you stretch out your pectoralis major, then suddenly it actually will send signals to your brain of greater confidence. So when I was struggling with confidence and insecurity, had I known to engage these muscles and stretch this and engage that, then I would have actually paid attention because it would have correlated to something that I was actually struggling with. But I think a lot of traditional education teaches us like, this is what you think. Here's your external rotators, memorize these muscles, memorize these muscles. And there's no purpose behind it. And for me, I need a purpose. And so I ended up graduating high school and I had a full scholarship to college, to a fine arts college, because that's where I thought my journey was going to lead me into Hollywood. Because really, Hollywood, growing up in Los Angeles, that was the only career path that I could see that where I could achieve the income and the impact that I wanted to make. I didn't see entrepreneurship as it is today. I only saw like big Hollywood stars making multiple millions of dollars and then choosing to lean into financing their own charities and having big charitable contributions. And that was such a need for me, something that I so desired that I was like, okay, well, maybe Hollywood is a thing and maybe I'll be like Reese Witherspoon and have my own production company. So I instead, but right 2 weeks before I was supposed to go start college, my dad found me through one of his customers this acting school that Ashley Judd and James Franco and Sean Astin went to, and he's like, Kim, just give it an audit. And I audited it, and for the first time, I actually saw people feeling. And this was I saw it and I said, whoa, like this, it wasn't like acting, like stage acting. It was like people actually being real about what they feel. And by that age, I had been so desensitized and so squashed in my emotions because that's what bulimia was. I would shove my emotions down with a whole bunch of food until like they couldn't contain themselves anymore and they would come up. And I saw people actually just being okay and being vulnerable with who they are, what the experience was that they were experiencing and being real with it. And I said, I have to be there. I have to learn this. I have to, and not just for my career, but for like my own humanity. Like, and so I ended up dropping out of college 2 weeks before I was supposed to start with 2 full scholarships to be able to then,
Oh, wow.
To go to this acting class. And my parents were fully supportive because that was the thing that even though with the addiction, even with the struggles that we had as a family, my parents were always supportive of every dream that I ever had. And that was like that was amazing. And so when I said I wanted to do this, they said, we fully support you. And it was at this school that the teacher gave me a syllabus and with 50 books to start reading. And as a straight A student, I was like, I'm going to go to Barnes & Noble. I'm going to get every book. And the first one he had, and it was like blocked out in this big box that said, this is the most important book you will ever read. And so I went to Barnes & Noble. I was so excited. I was like, okay, this book, it's the most important book that I'm ever going to read. And I walked into the self-help section, a section I'd never been in my life, and opened this book. And I'm like, what does this have to do with Hollywood? Like, what does this have to do with the movie industry? What is this about habits and like effectiveness? And I opened this book to this page and I remember reading it. And it was one of those moments, Derek, where it's almost like when you see someone speaking another language and you know they're communicating with each other, you know there's another language, you just don't know how to speak it. And I read in this book that you have the choice, and I'm going to paraphrase it, you have the choice to choose your emotional state and that you have the power to choose your reactions. And I was like, what? Because growing up in my household, everything was reactionary. Everything was like, oh, this happened in the business, drama. Oh, this happened in life. Dad came home drunk, drama. And so it was always reactionary. There was no vision. There was no foresight. And it was basically by the sheer grit and hustle of my parents that they built a multi-million-dollar company. Now, like knowing what I know, having worked with leaders and growing my own business, I'm like, damn, the fact that you just did it through the sheer resiliency of just getting up and going at it another day without really having a long-term vision was huge. So I read this book. It was a Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Hmm.
And I was like, I got to learn this language. I have to understand this. And at the same time, I needed a career to supplement my acting because there's Hot Girl number five only pays so much and getting cast in those roles. So that's like a $200 day. And so I knew I needed a job to actually support me and I didn't want to wait tables. So I wanted to do something that actually was beneficial, that I could set my own schedule. And I just was open to finding what that was. And one of my friends from acting class, she said, "Well, I'm getting certified in Pilates. Do you want some free Pilates lessons?" And because I was still going through my struggles with bulimia, my awareness that I wasn't, there were certain forms of exercise that weren't conducive. Like I chose to stop dancing because it was just too, I danced for 15 years and it was just too much of a triggering environment for me to stare at my body all day. I would go to the gym. I didn't know what I was doing. I would try to run a mile. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like an exercise induced asthmatic, couldn't run a mile to save my life. Literally couldn't run down the block with my like Walkman, like skipping the CD. And
Oh
I would be
gosh.
panting like I was going to die. And so I said, Pilates, I hear like some of the celebrities did that. And I said, sure, I'll be your guinea pig. I'll take a few free lessons. It was the first time within a few lessons I felt good in my body. The first time ever where I was like, oh, my body feels strong. It feels like toned. And I was actually seeing the results. After 30 days of doing Pilates, I actually dropped a jean size without even like dieting, without doing anything. And I said, I feel so good in my body. I have to teach this. And so I just followed my curiosity. I got enrolled in a teaching program. And within 1 year, I was the highest paid, youngest instructor, most fully booked instructor at the studio that I had started teaching at,
Oh wow.
because I just leaned into the love of teaching. And what that position taught me was really the power of leaning into teaching a process. I wasn't coming at fitness from like, I've always loved fitness. I hated fitness. I didn't even know what I was doing in fitness. But once I learned a process that I applied, that I could then master and then could do really, really well, that actually made me feel results, that was such a game changer, that I could approach leading in from that space very authentically. Where when clients would come to me saying like, I hate exercise, I don't like it, I'm like, me too. I could completely empathize with their pain and their struggle because I'd been there and I
Yep.
had found a solution. And that really taught me a lot about business. It taught me a lot about leadership, and it allowed me to really also see training for 10 hours a day, 10 different bodies, 10 different humans, allowed me to get out of my survival programming that I had grown up with, because I started to see belief systems that were different than the ones that I had believed. And it started to shake the frame of what I thought could be possible for my life, and for could be possible for my mental health, could be possible for my body, could be possible for my family and for my future relationships. And I saw some examples through some of my clients of things that I really didn't want to have. And I saw some examples from clients of mine that I was like, whoa, like you were able to achieve so much or do this so much. So I would start asking questions. And that's why I love podcasts like this and going on podcasts, because listening to different people's stories changed my life, because I was able to shake the frame of the survival perspective that I had been living in. And I started to see between that and Stephen Covey that I had the ability to choose. And if I could choose my emotions, then could I also choose my belief systems? And it was through that space of really starting to self question and reprogram my nervous system, because Pilates activates your parasympathetic nervous system with your breathing, that I actually was able to reprogram my mind and my body from 10 years of bulimia with no psychological or medical intervention. I reset my nervous system to no longer being on just like fight, flight, freeze, and through Pilates and through the physiology of changing my body. And I was able to reset my mindset by being around other people and listening to other people's stories and break down like what beliefs did they have that I would like to have, what thought process did they have that I could learn from, and how could I then grow. And I saw the power of mindset.
That's impressive. I mean, so there's you shared so much there that I want to unbox a couple of things. So
Sure.
from the perspective, your journey is incredible, right? I mean, from bulimia to going to college and saying no thanks college, to going to this acting program, to not wanting to be a waitress, to getting into something like Pilates, which seems to me like becoming a Pilates instructor wouldn't have such a profound impact on someone until you just explained all the aspects of it, right? The fact that you had exposure to all these people to sort of shake that tree that was so strongly planted in your life in terms of your perspective of like, okay, yeah, I don't want to be like this person's perspective, and but this person's perspective, like you said, it opened up alleys and it opened up lanes for you. And simultaneously you got the Stephen Covey book, which is helping you understand that language, right, and helping you understand that internal speak that I think a lot of us start to gain a little bit later in life. For those who can get a little bit younger, it's fantastic, but start to realize that you're accountable for where you are today, and you can make a decision and a choice as to where you're going, right? If as long as you own where you are, right? I put myself here, I made these decisions, I made these choices, but I can make different decisions and choices, just like some of these Pilates clients had made, and I can have a completely different outcome. I'm not stuck
Yeah.
to the roots of this tree that you've tried to shake. And the breathing thing is super cool because with Pilates, now let me tell you this: I've never done Pilates. I'm a fitness enthusiast, but I've still yet to go into Pilates. I'm oddly intimidated by it. So I'm a 6-time Ironman triathlete. You would think that does not intimidate me. It intimidates me. I'd rather go 140.6 miles for 11 hours than I would go in a Pilates studio, because I know it's hard, and I haven't bridged the gap. But the breathing, I've just spent the last 30 days doing what's called box breathing, in an effort to
Mm.
reset be able to toggle that switch from parasympathetic sympathetic, through the art of breathing. And it was a challenge in the podcast. We actually just released it today, and I will tell you that mastering that breathing technique over the last 30 days has changed my life, because I now sleep better than I've ever slept before, because I'm able to get out of that fight or flight mode which we're in all day, just go, 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 to when it's time to go to bed. And it sounds like Pilates harnesses that. So when you said that, kind of got me jacked up to say, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll try Pilates. Maybe you could be my coach. I don't know. We got to talk about this,
We'll talk
because
about it
we
because,
got to talk about
like,
this. I mean,
Pilates was such a game changer, and I remember I like one of my favorite things was when like some totally ripped jacked dude like would walk in and be like Pilates,
right. And
like
get crushed. Yeah.
this thing for girls, and within 10 minutes I'd have them crying. Like
Yeah.
they would be
That's
like shaking, like completely convulsing, because it's working your muscles in a very different way.
mm,
And because it's working your muscles in a very different way, it's working the deeper muscles that are closer to the bone. And the more you breathe into it, then you're oxygenating those muscles with even more blood flow. And so the cool part of it is the breathing combined with the deep muscle engagement. It literally, I just recently learned this, but the deep transverse abdominis breathing that you do in Pilates, where you're actually engaging your Kegel muscles, your pelvic floor, and your transverse, it actually sends a signal to your pineal gland that it can help decrud the pineal gland because of the breath and the engagement, because of that
mm.
conversation that's happening.
Oh,
And
wow.
so the be like for me, like when I can get my body, especially because I've been rehabbing my body after giving birth and 9 months of being pregnant, and now I'm changing my body again and like retraining it to go back into place. And the work that I'm doing, it's not, I'm not doing 20 crunches or like 200 crunches to get those abs. In fact, that's one of the things that I would see women come back after postpartum, and they're like, I'm doing all these crunches and these sit-ups and it's not working. And I'm like, I know, because they're not really deeply activating. Like, birth is such a powerful experience. And as I had two natural childbirths, Those were my Iron Woman marathons. My first one was 24 hours. My second one was so fast it was 2 hours, and my husband had to catch him because the midwife wasn't even here yet.
Oh, wow.
Um, so the experience of birth, it engages muscles in such a different way, and it's so deep. It's all of those deep pelvic floor muscles that are contracting and expanding. And so there's this power in it. And also being able to harness that power when you're recovering postpartum is super key, but it's not a power from like force and push. It's a power from surrender.
Hmm. Yeah, it's something that is I've a ton of interested in. I'm intimidated, but you're making me a little less intimidated. I think I need to cross the bridge. Maybe the next 30-day challenge is Pilates. I got to talk to the co-host of that show to see if he's got interest in it. So because the breathing had made a profound impact. So tell me, so now you're a Pilates instructor. You're starting to get yourself into the language of, we'll call it self-help. As you can sort of continue down this journey, kind of walk me through sort of what's led you up to today. And then I'd love to get a little bit about some of the work that you do, because it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So because I was using Pilates to supplement my career in entertainment, I actually got an opportunity to co-write a screenplay. And that was like the big dream that I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. I am going to write this movie. And I wrote this movie. It's one that no one expects that a girl who loves princesses and crowns would write. It's a movie that involves motocross and freestyle motocross, and has Danny Trejo and lots of drugs in it.
Nice.
And the core of the story, which is what I resonated with, because there's only about 7 archetypes in screenwriting. There's only 7 stories that there are ever. And if you try to create something outside of these 7 stories, it never resonates with an audience. Movie makers have tried it. It doesn't work. So there's 7 core stories that we identify with. One of which is the cool kid, the kid trying to belong or fit in with the group. And that's exactly what the story was. And I totally resonated it. We've all had those moments where we've wanted to fit in with the cool crowd, and where we have changed who we are to try to fit in, and it's still not right because we're trying to fit in. That's not really belonging. And so I wrote this film with the director. It got produced, it got distributed by Lionsgate. And there I was at the premiere thinking like, oh my gosh, here's my dream come true. This is exactly what I wanted. And I was only 90% fulfilled. And I was like, well, this is interesting. And so I just allowed myself to be curious. And 2 weeks later, I got a text from a friend of mine who had brought her son to, I got a text from my friend, and it was about her friend who she had brought to the film premiere along with her friend's son. And her friend's son, apparently, after seeing the film, changed his life. He was following the same trajectory of the main character. He was hanging out with the wrong crowd. He had started doing drugs. He was starting to deal drugs. And through watching this film, bro, he changed his life. And I was like, that is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I was so excited about it, but I didn't know how. So I thought, well, movie making and screenwriting, perhaps it was because I didn't have as much control as I thought I would as a screenwriter. I had more control than Hot Girl Number 5, but I did have I had some control as a screenwriter, but I didn't have as much control as if I was a producer or a director. And so I saw that I would want to go into being more of a producer, director, creator person and having more of a role. Well, at the same time, I had the opportunity to become a consultant for this backstretching device. And when I saw this backstretching device, I said, well, maybe I'm not going to be a producer director of a show. Maybe I'll be a producer director of a business. And I had told the man who had become my business partner, I said, I don't want to be a consultant. I want to be a partner. And so I found with entrepreneurship, I get the best of both worlds. I get to be the producer, the director of the show, the performer in essence, being the one going
Yeah.
on
Wear
doing
all
the
the
marketing
hats.
and all that, wear all the hats. And I was super excited about that. I was with that company for 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, my business partner said he wanted to buy me out. And it crushed me because then I had, for 3 months right before I got married, in the summer that I was supposed to be planning my wedding and, tasting cake, I was negotiating with lawyers who don't send you the nicest emails when you're not on their side.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly I'd always been very audacious in my career. In any career I wanted to go for, in any business I wanted to start, in anything I wanted to do. In sales, I was always very audacious. I was always putting myself out there. I was always networking. My friends back from acting school, they would always remember me being the hustler, like going out, making requests, going to networking events, meeting people, and like actively making it a business, not just like I'm going to lay back and wait for some parts and to come fall in my lap or
Mm-hmm.
to some opportunities. Like that was how I got the opportunity to write a film. And so I'd never had any sort of doubts about my capabilities as a business owner until it was brought to light by quote unquote professionals. And suddenly, all of my fears that I'd experienced in the form of my body and in the form of past relationships of not being good enough, not being capable enough, not being worthy, not being deserving, all of those fears were brought to light by professionals. And suddenly, I was bought out of this company that I'd spent 2 years building. And I felt absolutely crushed. And on my honeymoon, we we signed the buyout papers 3 weeks before I got married. I
Oh, wow.
ran off with my husband to our honeymoon. And on our honeymoon, 6 weeks in Italy, I'm like, what the f do I do when I get back? So we started brainstorming like you do on your honeymoon. And I said, I was like, well, I'm into all these things. I've loved health. I've accomplished things from my body. I have successfully found a relationship that really fuels me, that I feel so supported in. I had some success in business, and I was like, well, combining all these things. I loved pageants and writing, and I said, leaped off the couch after way too many espressos, and I said, crown yourself. And my husband was like, what's that? I said, I don't know, but that's the name of my company. That is what I'm going with. And he said, okay. And so I immediately went into action, having no plan, bought a whole bunch of like film equipment and got a website designer and bought the domain name and all the fancy things. And for a year and a half, I made no money in my business
Did you,
because
were you pursuing this as a life coach, or did you
I
not
was
have
pursuing
like a
this
real
as I
lane?
didn't know what I wanted.
Were you selling glitter water? Was there any glitter water
I
on the website?
basically was selling glitter water. Like it was a fancy, expensive blog, and it was because I was so scared of rejection and judgment again that I spent a year and a half in productive procrastination, which is what I tell all my entrepreneur clients when they are doing all the things that are like fancy things in their business, but that don't actually produce results. So, like posting fun things on Instagram without a call to action that's saying, hey, come work with me, not
Mhm.
having a clear offer. Like, if you don't have a clear offer, then everything else you're doing in your business is productive procrastination. Like it's all 100% about having that very clear offer. And I didn't have one because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I was spinning my wheels. I had no idea what I was doing. I had this like lifestyle brand that I knew I wanted, but I also wasn't fully embodying it. I had these values of ownership and growth and authenticity. But meanwhile, I was so scared of putting myself out there as a coach with this like glittery, girly brand because that was one of the things of one of the many fears that professional men had brought to light that, it's not professional to have sparkles and crowns and silliness in a business. And so I said, well, maybe this is just a blog and maybe my coaching is something else on the side. I didn't know what I was doing. And that was when I found out 18 months into making $0 in my business that I found out I was pregnant. And it was a wake-up call of epic proportions. And I suddenly realized I needed several things. I needed a process to put my clients through. I knew that what I was battling was a mindset and a business mindset and financial mindset block. And I knew it was a mindset block because I could feel the same things that I felt when I was bulimic. The fears of not being enough, the fears of rejection, the fears of trusting myself and my business to actually produce results, just like trusting my body to actually produce the results that I would be putting into it. And I knew it was a mindset thing. I knew I could transform it. I just didn't know how I'd done it with bulimia. And so I immediately, within like a not even a week, a few days of finding out I was pregnant, I was on the phone with a company that I had spoken to prior to about a coaching program and hiring a coach. And I was like, before I found out I was pregnant, I was like, I don't know the money. I was like $35,000 in debt. I was like, I don't know if an extra 5 grand, that's a lot. I don't know if this will work. And then I found out I was pregnant, and I called the company and the woman who ended up being my first coach. And she was like, get your butt down here. And I said, okay. So within 2 weeks, I said, well, I'm already $35,000 in debt. Why not another five?
What's another
And
5? Yeah.
what's another five? And I immediately signed up for this program. Within 2 weeks later, I was driving across the country to Vegas to get certified in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. And through that experience, I got a process that actually worked for me, that worked profoundly well for me to transform my own mindset. And then I started putting myself out there getting sales. I immediately, within 3 months, once I got my first coaching client for 2 grand, I quit my job because I had felt this was how low my self-worth was back then, Derek. I had had my own Pilates private studio business for 4 years. And I didn't even, after that buyout from my e-commerce company, I didn't even trust myself to run that. So I even got a side hustle job teaching Pilates for a chiropractor for less than I was even paid at my base rate when I first started teaching Pilates 8 years prior, because I didn't believe in myself that much. That's how low my self-worth was. And from that experience, though, I was so grateful because once I had my first sale, my first coaching client sale, I felt the certainty and trust in my ability to produce results. And it was with that I knew if I could get one and make the same amount of money with one client that I did in 1 month of teaching Pilates in my side job, then of course I was going to quit, because of course I could do more. And it rebuilt that trust in myself, because confidence is cultivated. It's not, you don't one day wake up and like are suddenly confident. Confidence is cultivated through acts of courage. It took a lot of courage to put down an extra 5 grand of debt into my already debt riddled credit cards. But it also took courage to say yes to an opportunity that my gut said, do this. And to drive across country, to say, yes, go, lean in for it. I know you don't feel ready. Keep going. It also took courage for me to start putting myself out there as a coach, and to say, like, this is the process that I have. And I started out on gig sites because I had no idea what I was doing with marketing, or like where to market or where to find clients. So I started on like these gig sites, and I was always the highest priced one, because most of those gig sites are like, they're bidding wars. People are like, oh, I'll do life coaching for $25. And I was like, $250 an hour. And I got one, and that's all I needed. And once I got one, I knew that I could get more. And it was through that building up of confidence and building up that certainty and trust with myself that I knew that I could grow my business and help with the mindsets of other leaders, entrepreneurs, and people who are just struggling with giving themselves the permission to really stand out and stand in their power. And what I've seen over the past 5 years of coaching visionary leaders is that, one, we have more ideas than we know what to do with. And being able to not entirely rein that in, because you don't want to completely rein it in, but be choosy instead of having shiny object syndrome, and giving ourselves the permission to fully stand out with the level of visibility that we actually want to have, and with the level of vulnerability as well. I mean, that is a big piece. I recently, just this past weekend, did a TED Talk, and it took it challenged what I thought. I was like, okay, I've got this visibility thing handled. No, there are certain things that I spoke on in my TED Talk that I never really talked about some experiences that I'd had in my childhood growing up with an alcoholic, and in the years that it was really bad, and the choices that I made of what I made those experiences mean for me. And it was because of that I gave myself permission. It was also because my dad passed in January that I said that I would allow he also wanted me to share some of the experiences. But I also said that, like, I'm going to allow myself to start sharing this part of my story, of the fact that, growing up as a kid, I was molested as a child, And I was able to forgive my dad and also have a transformed relationship to where I was very happy for him to be a grandpa once he was sober and meet my son. And so just showing the power of transforming people's stories, and the stories that we tell ourselves are typically the ones that we've decided on with the least amount of conscious awareness. And they're the ones that we're constantly watching ourselves experience. And so I started to question those stories about, my own business competence and my own competence in having a business. And that, just by questioning it, just like it did with my Pilates clients, it shook the frame of what I thought was possible. Shaking the frame using the power of our questions can be transformative for what we want to actually achieve. And so many of my clients have held themselves back because of experiences and traumatic experience. Many of my clients have had trauma and all types of abuse, just like I have in from their childhood. And sometimes as we're going to that next level, as we're building our businesses, those traumas come up. And one of the biggest ones that I've seen is shifting our focus from fear to faith, from instead of running away from what we don't want. I like to picture it like this. Like when most people start a business, or start anything that's like a purpose thing, they are starting it from the space of wanting to run away from something that they don't want. And so they want to run as fast and as far as possible. So they leap in the car, they start running as fast and as far as possible, but they're always looking in the rearview mirror at what they don't want. They're looking at that they don't want to be broke. They don't want to have the horrible boss. They don't want to, go into debt again. They don't want these experiences. They don't want to regurgitate their past. And yet there's only so far that you can go driving so fast, looking in the rearview mirror before you crash. And that's what happens with self-sabotage. Versus eventually, if you as a leader, especially one who's experienced trauma in their past, can learn how to shift your focus and shift your nervous system to focusing on the long-term vision, more of a parasympathetic response than a sympathetic, then you can radically transform the longevity of your business so that it turns into almost a challenge, like a fun challenge of how good can you actually stand it. Because so many people, especially who repeat trauma cycles, and I know because I did it myself, where they repeat the trauma cycle of going, they'll have a great month and then they'll not have a great month because they know how there were suddenly like expenses will come up or things will happen to where suddenly that great month turns into like a lost month. So then you that got to skyrocket up again. And so there's this constant like ramping up and ramping down versus the a progression of just up and up and up. But it's because their motivation strategy, their subconscious motivation strategy is still rooted in that like childhood trauma of trying to run away from something that they don't want and from that fear. And so they're constantly recreating those circumstances because they know how to survive in that fear. They know how to survive. They know that if they get their bank account to a certain amount, that then of course they're going to have some sales come in there because they're just going to, work their ass off or figure out a way to manifest those sales so that they come in because they know how to get themselves out of a bad place, but they don't know how to sustain the good on a consistent basis.
And it seems almost normal to them, right? Because we are in these patterns, we're doing these things over and over again. So it's almost they lean into that and gravitate towards that because the concept of that other approach, taking that step, having that vision, having that sense of purpose, so to speak, feels unnatural to them. So it's hard for someone to lean into that, to not look in the rearview mirror, not to look at the past and stay in that cyclical pattern of just self-sabotage, as you say. And I think that's where most people struggle. And that's why someone like yourself that can help identify these things and bring them to light and make people aware of them. Right. So now the cards are out on the table. They can understand why they think the way they think. Then it draws awareness to it. Right. And you can really start to make an impact in someone's life and really start to help them change, help them adapt. So it's amazing. And hearing your whole story and you as you kept talking, I didn't want to cut you off because you just kept the journey just kept building and you kept explaining everything perfectly. And the one thing I did want to ask you about though is when you're at that point in your life where you created Crown yourself, right? You're selling metaphorically, bags of glitter water at that point. You're not totally sure what you're doing. And then you find out
I
you're
wasn't
you're
selling anything, Derek. Like there was nothing for sale on my website. It was just
right.
a fancy, expensive blog.
It was a blog. It was like you said, it was a lifestyle expression, and like you're learning marketing, but you didn't really have your lane pick. You didn't have your vision. You didn't have your sense of purpose until you found out you were pregnant. And it was like, to me, it's very interesting because I was going to ask what made things shift, and it's pretty damn obvious what made it shift. That sense of purpose ignited this vision in your mind, which then gave you the courage to go out there and drop the 5 spot to go, I think you said, to Vegas, to be
Yep.
able to at that point now you're holding yourself accountable, right? I mean, you've developed the courage and you spent a lot of money. You're like, well, damn. And you build up what you kept saying was, I forget the term you used, but I always use playing small ball just from playing baseball, that, you need a lot of like singles and doubles. Those small wins will score you runs, right? You don't need a home run every time, because people are swinging for the fences and then they're worried about
Mhm.
failing and striking out, right? So, but real true baseball, winning and putting points on the board, it comes from playing small ball, getting those small wins of courage, and it builds over time. So hearing you unfold and unbox that is I think important for the listeners to hear.
Well, and I think one of the things about that is really the role and elevating your role, because it's not the title, like the title of CEO. I'd kind of like meh, meh, meh. It was like I'd had my own business. I had been a partner and the president of a e-commerce startup, and I'd had that. So like even though I had this drives me crazy now with new entrepreneurs when I see them like they have CEO, I'm like, how many employees do you have on their business card?
Right.
Because it's like there's a difference between a CEO with 500 employees and a CEO who is a solopreneur. There's a big difference.
Big difference.
Um, and and yet the title of mom, the role of mom was so powerful for me. When I was 18 years old, as 17, 18, and I was still struggling with bulimia, I had just when I was 17, I'd had a powerful conversation with my father about the things that I experienced in childhood. And it sent him down his own path where he started to self-destruct a bit more before he recovered, because of his own guilt and shame. And and for me, it allowed me to have that freedom, because your subconscious mind, it represses things, negative experiences and emotions until you're ready to actually deal with them. And when I was 17, I was actually ready to deal with this experience with my dad and bring it to light, bring it to the forefront, bring it to the table. And we had a powerful conversation about it. And I knew that I had a lot of healing to do from that. And for 2 years, I made myself a promise, because I'd always wanted to be a mom. Like being a mom has never, I think some people don't want it, and some people, like, they've always known that they want to be a mom. For me, I've also never wanted to just be a mom. Not saying that there's anything wrong with being just a mom and like not having a career, but my career makes me a better mom, and my being a mom makes me a better coach. Like, so both work hand in hand for me. And when I was 17, 18, I made a promise to myself that I would never have kids until I'd figured this stuff out. And that was right when I was in the heavy throes of bulimia, struggling to figure out my mindset. I hadn't yet found Pilates. I was in this very dark space, but I knew I could find a way. I always believed in in the possibility that there was light, that there was a way that I could find it no matter what I went through. And so when I found out I was pregnant, fast forward years later, I knew my mindset for that year and a half, it was still in a space of blame. I was still blaming my former business partner for my lack of success in my own business. He'd never been a part of that business. It was just, it's blame is so silly. And yet we do it so commonly and so easily. It's biological practically. and I was still in a space of complaining in a very negative mindset. So I looked at what I was listening to on a regular basis. I looked at and the content that I was consuming. I looked at the people, the conversations and the people that I was surrounding myself with. And I looked at like my own blaming, and I had to take ownership. And that was when I saw when I discovered I was a mom, like that was where I remember the moment where I was like literally holding the bouquet of pregnancy sticks in my hand. And I just knew. I was like, I have to take ownership and accountability that there is no one else responsible for my future and for the future of this little child than me right now. And the ownership conversation, when you're like really comfortable with a victim mindset, is not a fun one to have. But that was the victim mindset was always one that I'd grown up with. So that year and a half that I was in that I made no money in my business, that's where I was. I was in a complete victim mindset. Everything was somebody else's fault. Everything was my fault, because that's what high achievers do, where we put ourselves inside I forget the doctor who coined this term, the drama triangle, but we put ourselves in either the victim role or the villain role or the hero role. So that's the triangle of drama that we get stuck in, where the high achievers, typically the ones that I work with, they put themselves in both the villain role and in the hero role. So the hero role, it's their responsibility to save everyone. No matter, like they just strap on that hero cape. It's their responsibility. They take 150% ownership. And I like to tell all my clients that like, you can only take 100% ownership. The other people have in your relationships and in your life also have to take 100% ownership. Like you cannot take 10% of their ownership. And then the villain role is the role that I see with a lot of high achievers, where they say everything is my fault. They take so much responsibility that they take the other person's responsibility as well. And so it's they're the horrible person who's the cause of all the problems of all the business and all the things. And I'm like, okay, you're not that powerful. Like you are powerful, but you're not that powerful. And so when we flip the drama triangle, when we're able to shift out of it, the victim becomes a creator, the villain becomes the challenger, and the hero becomes the coach. So the victim becomes a creator. They start to create their own circumstances. So that's exactly what I started to do. I started to look at the circumstances that I was in, broke, in debt, not having a process, not feeling competent in a skill set. So I needed to find a process and a skill set, because I knew if I had a process and a skill set, I could sell the crap out of it, because I'd done it with Pilates. The villain, I had to shift from being that villain role where like everything was my fault, I'm such a failure, all those identity sort of beliefs of like how horrible I am, which were all false and plagiarized programming anyways. I had to shift those into challenging them. I had to challenge them. Is that ultimately true? Challenging with better questions, and then allowing myself to take full responsibility for my choices, and anybody else can take full responsibility for their choices. And then the hero role, I had to coach myself. I had to learn how to coach instead of trying to swoop in and solve everybody else's problem. Like I had to realize my husband's on his own journey with his own money mindset, and like I'm on my own journey. So I'm not going to try to like have the blind leading the blind in this space. Like I'm going to coach myself, and he will coach himself. And it was taking that autonomy. And when you are able to flip that conversation from being a victim and a villain and a hero to the creator, the challenger, and the coach, it's a game changer for how you start to perceive the world around you. You start to take more ownership, and it actually empowers you to have the courage that you can change your circumstances, even if you don't like your circumstances. And at least you can change your attitude around them. And so I started to change my attitude. Now I look back at my buyout with so much gratitude, because it made me learn one of the biggest lessons that I've been now able to coach my clients through, which is people having an alignment of values. My business partner and I were very passionate about this product, but we didn't have an alignment of values. We didn't have a foundation. And so I was operating with my values of like speed and freedom and, go as fast as possible. And his values were much more structured and process and, having the proper credentials. And so I was constantly butting heads with him because I didn't have a marketing degree. I didn't have a business degree. I didn't have a college degree. I didn't even go to college. I just learned entrepreneurship on the fly. And that's where I've always learned anything, is on the job. And it was just a mismatch of values. And it's been, learning that lesson has been such a game changer for the work that I do with my clients, for when we do the values-based work in the first few sessions that I'm working with my business owners on. It is a game changer for who their customers become, for who they attract as employees and as freelancers into their, even the freelancers that they hire, and who they attract as partners and power partners.
You are such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to stuff. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. We need to, we're getting low on time. I want to, obviously invite you to come back and dive more into some of these lessons, like that drama triangle that you just, like, I usually don't listen to my podcast after I record them, but I'm going to listen to that because I thought that was a really great analogy about how you flipped it. And I mean, just what a powerful asset to teach your clients, to be able to help them understand some of the things that are going through their head. Like I said earlier, just slapping them on the table and making them aware of it. I have two final questions for you. First of all, you are clearly a tremendous resource for those looking for the insight into themselves, into their thoughts, and to be able to help take people to that next level, right? Something that you've been able to do over and over and over with yourself, but also with your clients. I mean, the list of testimonials, if you get a chance to look at our website, which I'm going to have you tell in a second, is incredibly long. Wrap the planet with it. And it is a testament to you, your energy, and your journey that you've been through. So how do people get in contact with Kim and learn about, what you do, glitter water, all of that? How do we find you?
If you liked what I said on this podcast, then definitely go to crownyourself.com, and I would love to have a conversation with you. You can just click the button that says work with me, and I'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, and I'm very confident that any client that works with Kim is able to take that 5-cent glitter water that they're selling and sell it truly for $50 without increasing your cost of goods, right? So it is her website is very detailed, very in depth, and it will speak to you. So I strongly encourage you. It'll be in the show notes. It'll be on the webpage dedicated to this show, so people can just click on it and go right to her website. So last question, I ask this question of everybody at the end of the show. So you unboxed like a ton here, and there's a ton that we didn't even get to. So if people that are listening to this right now just completely spaced out during the podcast because they're like ticked off of people in traffic, dropping F-bombs, whatever, and they only can remember one thing, they forget everything you just said, but they can take one lesson, one little tidbit, one little zinger, something to take with them in their lives to help them on their journey to become the absolute best version of themselves, what would that one thing be, in your opinion?
Make a decision to take ownership. Ownership is a decision. And most people don't decide. Most people live in the land of like they want to, or they're trying to make a decision, or they would like to make a decision. But when you decide, you cut down all other possibilities other than what you've decided on. And so just make the decision to take 100%, not 110%. You can't take anybody else's ownership, but just to take 100% responsibility for your choices and your results. Because if you don't like the results that you're producing right now, you can change the cause when you take ownership that you also produce the effect.
Love it. Accountability is something that we will definitely speak more when we speak again. So thank you so much for carving out some time out there in beautiful Australia for us today, and for the listeners. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Derek.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Adapt You podcast. We hope that today's show gave you the inspiration, tools, and resources, and just motivation to become and improve and change yourself on your path and on your journey to becoming the absolute best version of yourself. Now, that said, today's episode is brought to you by Adapt Media Agency, a full-service digital marketing agency based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, servicing customers across the globe. So whether you're a small startup business or a large business looking for digital marketing needs, Adapt Media Agency is there to help you with things such as website development, videography, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube advertising, social media management, search engine optimization, pay-per-click advertising. I can go on and on and on, but anything digitally marketing related that is going to help you grow your brand and change the way that you're interacting with your companies, Adapt Media Agency is that company for you. So if you want to learn more information, you can see our links in the mentions below or go to www.adaptmediaagency.com for more information. So thanks again for listening to the show. We hope you had an amazing experience. If you like this show and you felt it did a great job for you, if you're listening to us, over iTunes or one of the podcast channels, please leave us a review. It really helps us grow our brand and grow the show to deliver you greater guests and greater content. And if you're watching on YouTube, please pound that like button, hit the subscribe, and so that way you don't miss another episode here of the Adapt You podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.